So folks, there's a new movie. It's coming out very soon in theaters, and it's called Sound of Hope. I want to talk about the movie itself, which is just awesome. It's moving. It's amazing. It's uplifting. It's an inspiring film. But the real reason I want to talk to you about it is because it is the next move in what the Daily Wire is doing in the entertainment business. So if you look back at the timeline here in 2021, we broke into entertainment by uncanceling Gina Carano. And then, of course, we made a movie with Gina Carano after she was canceled unceremoniously by Disney. And then in 2022, we released the best documentary of the last 10 years, Matt Walsh's What is a Woman? And we also launched our streaming service, Daily Wire Plus. And then in 2023, we introduced Benke so that your kids have something awesome to watch that is not going to be smeared with a bunch of left-wing gobbledygook. Well, this week, we announced our next big venture in entertainment. Daily Wire Plus is now going into theaters. We're proud to announce that Daily Wire Plus is partnering with Angel Studios to release Peachtree Productions' incredible new film, Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot. Now, Angel Studios is an amazing company. Obviously, they've been involved in this business for quite a while. They're responsible for the theater release of Sound of Freedom, most famously, but they've done a bunch of other films as well. They do amazing work. They're a values match for us, and we are super excited to work with them because they're changing the face of the entertainment industry. It's going to be an amazing partnership, we believe, in helping to change the kinds of entertainment that people can consume every time they go to the theater. I want to show you some of the trailer for Sound of Hope, which is coming out in theaters thanks to Angel Studios and Daily Wire Plus very soon.
Are you sure these people want us?
I know they do.
You can call me Mama.
It's hard to feel like I'm the only one who sees these things. 70% of the kids in the system are there because of neglect. The other 30% are put through hell. We need your help.
Can you imagine our kids on their own? We can't just look away. The state ain't no family.
Are you sure these people want us?
I know they do.
You can call me Mama. Oh, Lord.
If we can't wrap our arms around the most vulnerable, then what do we have? Noise! And the children can't take the noise anymore.
This is something that we must do.
22 families want to adopt. Whole town wants kids now.
That's about right.
What's happening with Possum Trot could mean a huge change for the system.
We want the ones that nobody else won't.
Who hurt you, baby? I'm not giving up on you. You can't give up on me either. What we gonna do? Everybody's falling apart.
I'm doing the best I can.
The real world hits hard.
I don't want to be here. I can't give him back. We gotta work on this together. We your people now. And love never gives up.
It's amazing. I mean, and this is the kind of stuff that Angel produces, and this is the kind of stuff that we are eager to partner with. Obviously, this is a story that is about Christian families who are adopting kids, who are in rough circumstances. It takes on issues that are edgy and hard to watch, but also have real meaning to people. That's the kind of stuff that Angel has been doing historically. It's what this movie is too. We can't wait for you to see it in theaters, and we couldn't wait to announce it to you today. Daily Wire Plus joining Angel Studios in putting Sound of Hope in theaters. So Joe Biden has been a disaster on pretty much every front, which is why in the polling he is doing really badly right now. And I lead pretty much every show with this because obviously the 2024 election is happening. It is happening fast, despite the fact that it seems like it's taking actually forever. It's going to be in not all that long, just 5 months from now, we'll already know who is the elected president of the United States in 2024. The current polling remains not good for Joe Biden in the battleground states. He remains solidly behind Donald Trump. Overall, he remains about even with Donald Trump. But the bottom line is that he is running into some serious headwinds right now. According to the Real Clear Politics polling averages, he is currently running about even with Donald Trump in Wisconsin, but he is running behind Trump solidly in Arizona, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, in North Carolina, in Nevada. He's running very narrowly behind him in Michigan. If Donald Trump wins one of these states, Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania, the election is effectively over. If he wins Nevada, he might even be able to lose all three of those states and still, through some funky math, pull out a tie or a victory in the Electoral College. The bottom line is the map is very wide for Donald Trump. It is very narrow for Joe Biden. And it is very narrow for Joe Biden because, again, the big thing about Joe Biden is that he is crappy at being the president of the United States. This is the thing that nobody can get over. It isn't even his age. Yes, his age hurts him. Yes, his age means that he feels as though he is going to fall down and hurt himself at any moment, that he were one broken hip away from a Kamala Harris presidency. Of course it feels like that, but that's not the real reason why he is suffering in the polling. After all, he ran last time and he was super old and he was pretty feeble last time. He's more feeble this time, and that's more of an issue for him. But what's actually happening is that his terrible presidency is being projected into something imagistic, which is not particularly new. Jimmy Carter, when he lost his reelect effort to Ronald Reagan in 1980, all of his incompetence in office was projected into an image of him as weak and vacillating on a personal level. And that's what human beings tend to do. What we tend to do is take all of the things we know about people and then we project them into personality aspects or even physical aspects of the people we are thinking about. All the worst people you know seem uglier to you. All the best people you know seem better looking to you. There's a halo effect and there's a reverse halo effect around people. So yes, Joe Biden is way too old to be running for president of the United States, and he is quite diminished at this time. But that's not the real reason he's so unpopular. The real reason he is so unpopular is because he sucks at being president. And you can see it in the polling data. He dropped down into the 40s, the low 40s, with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which revealed, number one, that he does not care about human beings outside of his family. That number two, he is a weakling. And then number three, he has no actual plan, but a lot of convictions on all the wrong issues. Which means that every bad news story that comes out dings him still further. A pretty bad news story that's getting wildly undercovered from yesterday. The news story is that 8 men from Tajikistan with potential ties to ISIS out of Central Asia were arrested over the weekend in New York, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles. 3 people familiar with the matter told NBC News on Tuesday. The suspects had been on the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force radar and were arrested by personnel with ICE. All 8 men crossed through the southern border into the United States. Their criminal background checks came back clean when they crossed, according to 2 officials familiar with the matter. At least 2 of those men crossed the border in spring 2023. One of those men used the CBP One app, which the Biden administration created to allow migrants to book appointments to claim asylum, according to officials. Well, that is disastrous. Okay, because the reality is that if these folks hadn't gotten caught, if these evil terrorists had not been caught, presumably they would have killed Americans on American soil after sneaking through the southern border. But we've been told by Joe Biden that there's nothing he can do about the southern border. Simultaneously, Joe Biden is out there saying he might be able to do something via executive action on the southern border. Meanwhile, Alejandro Mayorkas, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, has said that the southern border is really fairly secure and everything is going fine over there. And indeed, the system that has been set up allowed these people in. It appears that at least 3 of these people went through a port of entry. One went through an actual app. 2 of them apparently showed up at the southern border and then were processed. As for the other 5, we don't know that they crossed between ports of entry. But listen, I've been down to the southern border. I've spoken with members of the Border Patrol Union. What they say is, we have no idea how many terrorists are in the country. Because the vast majority of terrorists who are entering the country are doing so between ports of entry. In fact, the entire Biden strategy, which is to process for asylum as many illegal immigrants as possible and make that the first priority of Border Patrol, means that every time Mexican drug cartels drop off a load, a shipment of illegal immigrants at the border, everyone from Border Patrol rushes there and then start processing everybody for asylum, leaving the border wide open. When we were down on the Arizona border, and you can see this in our series, The Divided States of Biden, when we were down there on the Arizona border, there was no one there. We drove for probably 20 miles on the southern border, and there were no Border Patrol agents anywhere in some of the roughest country on the border, which is precisely where you would sneak through if you were either a drug smuggler or a terrorist. We'll get to more on this in just a moment. First, the cost of living is up almost 20% from 2021. Families everywhere are feeling that burden. But legacy media, they keep saying that it's fine. In fact, there's an entire article in the Wall Street Journal today about how it's all in your head. A recent Business Insider article made the case the American people are to blame for this dumpster fire economy. It's your perception that's the problem. This is all gaslighting. So let me help you find a way to save money in this economic climate. One way, switch on over to Pure Talk. If you're one of many American families looking to cut down on your monthly bill, you need to start with your cell phone service. I recommend Pure Talk because it's both affordable and reliable. Pure Talk is rapidly becoming the wireless company of choice for conservatives. Plus, it's great for families. The more lines you add, the more you save. Not to mention, Pure Talk is veteran-led. Instead of funding DEI initiatives, they fund basic services for vets who've served the country. And 100% of their customer service team is located right here in the United States. If you're looking for ways to save money for your family, I highly recommend switching on over to Pure Talk. Visit puretalk.com/Shapiro to explore their offers. When you make the switch, you'll get an additional 50% off your very first month of service. Visit puretalk.com/Shapiro. Upgrade your cell phone service to America's most dependable 5G network. Save an extra 50% off your very first month. That's puretalk.com/Shapiro today. Joe Biden's immigration policy has already gotten Americans killed. We, of course, know about Lake and Riley, among others, American citizens who have been murdered by illegal immigrants who have come across the border. But the possibility of a very serious terror attack on America's soil because of an open border, that is a very real possibility. And members of Border Patrol know this. Here, for example, is a Border Patrol agent who spoke out saying, our hands are tied. This is what he told CNN.
What do you think, this executive order, is that going to do anything?
Well, it only took him, 3 years and 7 months?
In a rare encounter, we meet a Border Patrol agent eager to vent. He asks us to mask his identity, worried he'll be fired for talking so openly.
It was his job to do. They tried to secure the border. We didn't have to babysit.
Does it frustrate you when you hear that, when you hear the narrative, like, why aren't Border Patrol doing anything? And
Our hands are tied. If I don't allow them to cross and they call and complain, now I'm in trouble and I'm going to lose my job.
Okay, so it is Joe Biden's border policy that has created all of this. And then hilariously, Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, deeply untalented, affirmative action pick for the White House press secretary because, of course, she's intersectional. Her only statement on this is that this is basically the Republicans' fault because Republicans want to defund the FBI. Now, the reality is the vast majority of Republicans do not want to defund the FBI. They would like to see more oversight within the FBI. They would like to see the FBI not become a tool of internally motivated political actors on behalf of the Democratic Party. But here she is trying to proclaim that the border crisis is the fault of Republicans.
We're also grateful for the law enforcement for their quick work on this to make sure that we keep Americans safe. This is another example of why we think some calls from Republicans to defund the FBI is a bad idea, is troublesome. And so we'll continue to call that out as well.
Well, you're not doing quick work to keep Americans safe. These people shouldn't have been in the country at all. That is the point. The point is that if you had a closed border, this would not be happening. It is that simple. And that's just one of the issues where Joe Biden is a deep and abiding failure. The top two issues for Americans in this election cycle are immigration and inflation. Those are not the issues Joe Biden is focusing in on. Joe Biden is focusing in solely and completely on the quote-unquote threat to democracy that Donald Trump supposedly presents. That is not what most Americans are concerned about. And if Donald Trump simply redirects Americans' perceptions back to the things they actually care about, those kitchen table issues, then Donald Trump is likely to win the election. That's why when it comes to the debate that is coming up in just a couple of weeks here, Donald Trump would be doing himself a great disservice if he allowed that debate to turn into some sort of long-form conversation about January 6th in election 2020. Every time that is mentioned, he should say, I have my opinion on that, you have your opinion on that, but I can tell you what everyone agrees on. Joe Biden is a terrible president. That is why his approval rating is currently 37%. That is why he is competitive with a person that you guys deem to be a convicted felon after sicking law enforcement on me. Speaking of inflation, it turns out that the prospect that the Federal Reserve was going to come in like Tarzan swinging on a vine and carry off Jane, save Joe Biden's presidential run here with a bunch of rate cuts just before the election. That looks like that's not going to happen. It turns out that inflation is not coming down at the rate that Joe Biden needs it to come down. CNBC was reporting just yesterday that actual consumer price index has now reached a new all-time high.
On headline, non-seasonally adjusted, the actual index, it moved up to 314.069, a new all-time high. If we look at the core index, which is seasonally adjusted, that moved to 318.14. Guess what? A new all-time high.
Inflation is not, in fact, going down at the rate it needs to be going down, which is why Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is now saying that he is going to limit the number of rate cuts at best this year. On Wednesday, officials held rates steady and offered little evidence that they were prepared to begin lowering interest rates soon, as their counterparts in Canada and Europe began doing last week, which is why the dollar remains strong against foreign currencies. Most officials project they could lower rates once or twice at four remaining meetings this year, suggesting a start to cuts no sooner than September. Now, again, that's whistling past the graveyard. That is Joe Biden deeply hoping that the Federal Reserve saves him from his own bad economy, that come September, the inflation statistics will somehow justify a rate cut that will boost investment in the economy as the rates go down just before the election. Powell said, we're looking for something that gives us confidence that inflation is moving sustainably down. The European Central Bank, the Bank of Canada, cut interest rates last week and indicated additional reductions were possible, even though inflation remains above their targets, because they expect inflation to keep declining. But the United States is in a different position. Growth is stronger. Tight monetary policy might be transmitting more slowly to the economy. The U.S. financial system relies less on bank lending than in the past. Homeowners are shielded from rapid rate increases of 2022 and 2023 because they locked in ultra-low rates on 30-year fixed-rate mortgages, which aren't as prevalent in other parts of the world. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means that Joe Biden is going to have to just give people free money. And that's what Kamala Harris is out there preaching. If inflation is high and you're not going to be able to bring it down in time for the election, basically Joe Biden is going to enact modern monetary theory. In the middle of an inflationary cycle, he is going to pour more money into the economy. So Kamala Harris, just yesterday, she was out there bragging about giving people free money when it came to their mortgages.
We are also giving for people who are the first generation in their family to seek to buy a home, $25,000 grants for startup capital to actually be able to pay down on home ownership.
How can you make the case that you are lowering inflation while pouring $25,000 per family that is trying to buy a home for the first time into the economy? How can you do that? Especially when the government is now pushing, again, the kind of subprime mortgages that led to the real estate crash of 2007, 2008. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris is bragging about student loan forgiveness. Again, we have an inflationary cycle. These are just people who are pouring money on the flames, but only to specific interest groups. Okay, because what Kamala Harris is talking about specifically there with regard to both student loans, which is for college students, and with regard to these grants to first-time homeowners that's supposed to disproportionately target minorities. It's all about just giving money to the base.
We have now forgiven over $160 billion in student loan debt, benefiting about 5 million people. I have met just today people who have had their student loan debt forgiven. Please testify.
Please testify that you paid them off with my money, my kids' money, the money that you're going to have to borrow. We'll get to more on this in just one moment. First, let's say you had an employee, let's say that somebody working for you just routinely fell asleep in the middle of interviews, or, just zoned out in the middle of speeches, or just started speaking gibberish. I'm not naming names that rhyme with Joe Biden, but let's say you wanted to replace that person and you didn't actually have to have a voting process. Let's say that person worked for you and actually wanted to, replace. ZipRecruiter would be the place to go. ZipRecruiter finds qualified candidates fast right now. You can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter's user-friendly technology guides you to finding top talent. When you post your job, ZipRecruiter's intuitive matching technology presents you with a list of qualified candidates. Once you've reviewed your list of qualified candidates, you can swiftly invite your top choices to apply. This streamlined process encourages them to apply sooner, allowing you to fill that role faster. Amp up your own hiring performance with ZipRecruiter. Find that best talent fast, because if you don't, somebody else will. Just head on over to ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. Try it out for free. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter is indeed the smartest way to hire. ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire to get started. But again, this is what you are relegated to when you have a bad presidential candidate who's done a bad job. It's all payoffs, whether those payoffs are physical payoffs in the form of actual money or just emotional payoffs to your radical base. And the cardinal sin of the Biden administration, they came in pledging to be moderate, and then they turned into Bernie Sanders. And this is why you're seeing protests spring up everywhere, because they know that they've got their man in the White House. They believe that the harder they push on the radical side, the more Joe Biden will give in, at least to awkward standoffs like the one that happened just yesterday when climate protesters charged a congressional baseball game. Now, you'll remember the last time Democrats decided to disrupt a congressional baseball game, there was a Bernie Sanders acolyte who ended up multiple Congress people, including Steve Scalise, who almost died. This time, they didn't bring guns, but they did rush the congressional baseball game. What was amazing here is the reaction of Democrats in the dugout. So as these people are dragged away, Republicans are cheering, and Democrats basically don't know what to do, because it turns out these are all Democrat supporters rushing the congressional baseball game. These moron climate protesters getting tackled. You can hear the crowd chanting USA. It turns out that most Americans really do not like these people. They really do not like climate protesters who throw soup at the Mona Lisa. They really don't like people who glue their hands to the streets and shut down traffic. They really don't like it. But it turns out Democrats have a very difficult time dissociating from precisely these types of people out of fear that they are going to then insult the fellow travelers. Meanwhile, at the same exact game, Democratic fans were screaming "Free Palestine" at the baseball game. I'm not sure how you're going to free Palestine at a congressional baseball game, but, you know, go for it. Whatever floats your boat, you idiots. They're screaming it during the Star-Spangled Banner, which is an amazing look, by the way. Nothing says you love America more than screaming "Free Palestine," which would be a terror state, immediately in the middle of the national anthem. And these are the people that Democrats have decided to cater to. There was an exhibit in New York called it was for the Nova Music Festival. It was supposed to demonstrate the atrocities at the Nova Music Festival. And terror supporters, literal terror supporters, showed up. They're not hiding the ball here. They're not actually pretending to just be pro-Palestinian. These are people who are waving like actual and flags in the middle of New York City. Why are these people in the United States? Seriously. And there's an agglomeration of overt terror supporters and fellow traveler moron white students with bad parents. This exhibit was put up by Hollywood producer Scooter Braun. To his credit, he said he's not going to be intimidated by any of this crap. He said, "For those who choose to protest against innocent music lovers who are massacred, we will dance again and you are all invited. Thank you for the inspiration. It is more important than ever that we fight for our shared humanity." Good for Scooter Braun. Again, it's just an absurdity. But these are people that the Democrats are having serious trouble dissociating from. So the White House did put out a statement. Andrew Bates called the hundreds of far left protesters, quote, "outrageous and heartbreaking." He said in a statement that profane banners of terrorist organizations should not be flown anywhere, especially not on American streets. I would believe him more if this administration were not attempting to give $400 million to the Palestinians who are represented by terror groups. Antony Blinken announced that one yesterday. So at the same time they're condemning terror supporters on the street of New York for carrying these flags, they're giving people who love these flags $400 million. That's after spending $300 million to build a useless pier in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea that immediately washed away. And after attempting to garner congressional support for a few $1 billion that will eventually be poured into the pockets of terror supporters, here's Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
It is time for everyone to step up. And for those who have already given, and given generously, give more. The United States has for decades been the largest single country provider of assistance for Palestinians. Today, I'm announcing an additional $404 million in new aid to Palestinians, in addition to the more than $1.8 billion in development, economic, and humanitarian aid that the United States has provided since 2021.
Pour that one right down the rat hole because it will immediately be ingested by all the terror groups who lead every hierarchy that has any governing power in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. So I'll take you a little more seriously at the White House protesting terror groups when you stop funding them. As an American taxpayer, I prefer you not fund both sides of the war. That would be great. Antony Blinken is so benighted that he spent yesterday suggesting that they are still determined to, quote, bridge gaps with Hamas. So what happened in terms of the negotiations between the Israelis and Hamas is that Israel said that we are willing to contemplate a deal where there's a temporary ceasefire for release of hostages, but we are not going to give up on our goal of extirpating the terror group. And Antony Blinken's like, I'm going to bridge that gap. And Israel's like, you know, it'd be great if we can get our hostages back and also destroy the terror group. And Antony Blinken is turning to Yahya Sinwar, who's saying, I'm not giving up the terror. I'm not giving up the hostages. And I'm also not going to stop governing. And I want Israel to move out. And Blinken's like, can you meet him like halfway? You know, like give up the hostages, but don't leave power. Or to Israel, can you meet them halfway? It's just pathetic. We'll get some more on this in just one moment. First, investing in your future, that's not something you should put off. That's why I'm always looking for new ways to diversify my portfolio. So when I first started my business, I knew I had to be smart. I put the cash somewhere where it has potential to grow and actually work for me. Even when it comes to my investment strategy now, I am constantly looking for better ways to invest. Robinhood has changed the investment landscape. They've pioneered commission-free stock trading. Today, they offer innovative products to over 23 million funded customers to help users build a better financial future. With Robinhood, you're in the driver's seat. You have complete autonomy to make investments toward your future goals. Whether you're interested interested in long-term investing or trying to beat inflation, Robinhood has the tools to help you pursue those goals. Robinhood could help you build a better financial future. Download that Robinhood app or visit Robinhood.com. With a gold membership, you could earn 5% APY on uninvested cash, get bigger instant deposits, and get access to professional research from Morningstar and real-time market data, plus a lot of other features as well. Download that Robinhood app or visit Robinhood.com. That's Robinhood.com. Download the app right now to learn more. Investing involves risks. Returns are not guaranteed. Other fees may apply. Robinhood Gold is offered through Robinhood Financial LLC as a subscription offering premium services for a fee. Terms apply to the APY. Rated subject to change. More info in the description of this podcast. Here's Anthony Blinken. Yeah, the idea inside the halls of power that terrorists can be negotiated with successfully is so patently insane, but it's bought into by the entire State Department, which has been an Arabist hotbed my entire lifetime.
Based on what we've seen and what I've discussed with the Prime Minister and what we've discussed with our Egyptian colleagues, we're determined to try to bridge the gaps.
Bridge the
gaps.
And
I believe those gaps are bridgeable. Doesn't mean they will be bridged because, again, it ultimately depends on people saying yes.
I have a question. How are you going to bridge that gap? There's no. This is not a negotiation over salary here. It's an absurdity. But this administration is trafficking in absurdity. According to Politico, they're trying to figure out exactly what the day after plan will be. So while they demand that the Prime Minister of Israel come up with a day after plan before finishing off Hamas battalions still in Rafah, and there is no day after plan because it turns out the only realistic day after plan, unfortunately, Israel doesn't want to do this either, would be for a large-scale Israeli military presence in the Gaza Strip until the end of time or until the Palestinians moderate, whichever comes first. That's the only real day after plan, and everyone knows it. The Americans know it, the Arabs know it, the Israelis, everyone knows it, but Tony Blinken and the Biden administration refuse to say it. So they keep wish-casting bizarre solutions into existence. So listen to this one. Listen, this is from Politico. From think tankers to McKinsey types to Washington bureaucrats, plenty of people are offering proposals. Some focus on the immediate security and governance needs of Palestinians left in Gaza, using terms like contact group and mandate. Some dream of Gaza soccer stadiums decades from now. Okay, because of the paradise that was built in Gaza the minute that the Israelis pulled 8,000 Jews out of Gaza and allowed the Palestinians to burn up the greenhouses. The Biden administration, this is again, according to Politico magazine, the Biden administration is coalescing around plans for an interim Palestinian council to govern Gaza and a security coalition in which the U.S. military will play a major role. Okay, as an American taxpayer, I'm going to go no on that one. Here are a couple things that I think are horrible ideas as an American. Importing massive populations of people who hate Americans and hate Jews. That seems like a terrible idea. We got enough of those on our streets already. So I'm going to go no on that. I'm also going to go no on hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars paying terrorists. That also seems like quite a terrible idea. Also, putting American military men and women on the ground in the Gaza Strip to what, slug it out with on a street-to-street level? How in the hell is that in America's interest? The Biden administration is so crazy. They're so crazy, honestly. That's such a crazy proposal. But what is it about? It's all about not alienating the Dearborn supporters. That's all this is about. Yes, there's an ideological component where they refuse to acknowledge the reality in the region, which is that the Palestinian issue is not central. That if tomorrow the Biden administration stopped jabbering about this particular issue, the Saudis would normalize with the Israelis like that. They were ready to do so when Trump was president. They've already telegraphed that in the Wall Street Journal, saying that as long as the Israelis give a verbal agreement to have possible negotiations sometime in the future about a Palestinian state, they'll sign on to it, which is like the weakest tea I ever heard. But again, this is really just about the Biden administration, the Biden campaign cannot dissociate from its radical base. And so they have to do whatever they can to split the baby wherever they can. And by the way, the radicals know this, which is why they continue to push harder and harder and harder. Apparently, when Netanyahu arrives to speak before Congress July 24th, far-left organizations are already vowing to shut down Washington, D.C. Presumably, the Biden administration at that point will then praise the protesters for their deep commitment to human rights as they stand for. Not only that, the protesters decided it would be a wonderful idea to go vandalize Jewish homes in New York. According to the New York Post, the Brooklyn Museum's director and a number of its Jewish board members were targeted overnight by anti-Semitic vandals who tossed red paint and scrawled blood on your hands across their homes. Director Ann Pasternak's co-op apartment in Brooklyn Heights was among those targeted by the vile mob when they strung up a sign that screamed, Ann Pasternak, Brooklyn Museum, white supremacist Zionist. An inverted red triangle was also sprayed on her door. That's a symbol used by to identify Israeli military targets. These are the kind. Why are these people on the march? The answer is they push where they feel mush. And the Biden administration is total mush. They are total and complete mush. Or they're on the side of these people. At the universities, they're certainly on the side of these people. According to a brand new report from the Washington Free Beacon, remember that time that Columbia administrators were supposedly so put out by the protesters who had taken over their campus and were threatening Jews? Well, it turns out that photos of text messages sent during a panel captured by an attendee provided a glimpse into the administration's attitude toward the plight of Jewish students on campus. According to the Washington Free Beacon, on Friday, May 31st, alumni descended on Columbia University's Manhattan campus to celebrate their class reunions. In addition to eating and drinking, the festivities included several panel discussions featuring professors and administrators. One focused on Jewish life on campus was particularly newsworthy. Student protesters had broken into and occupied a university building during the academic year, and they had reconstituted themselves to disrupt reunion festivities. So they did a panel on this. In the audience, according to two attendees, were several top members of the Columbia administration. The administrators included Joseph Surratt, the dean of Columbia College, Susan Chang Kim, the vice dean and chief administrative officer of Columbia College, Kristen Crom, a dean of undergraduate student life, and Matthew Pastishnik, an associate dean for student and family support. Chang Kim was on her phone texting her colleagues about the proceedings, and they were replying to her the entire time. As the panelists offered frank appraisals of the climate Jewish students have faced, Columbia's top officials responded with mockery and vitriol. This is difficult to listen to, but I'm trying to keep an open mind to learn about this point of view, Chang King texted Surratt, the dean of the college. Yup, he replied. Chang King then used vomit emojis to describe an op-ed about anti-Semitism by Columbia's campus rabbi. Again, all of these people, these are the people who run the universities. And these are the people that the Biden administration is having a very difficult time separating off from. And you can see why. We'll get to more on that in just one moment. First, we know here at the Daily Wire what it's like to start and run a business, and saving time is the biggest, most important factor. That's why I am so excited to introduce you to Ramp. If you're a finance professional looking for a better way to maximize productivity and cut wasteful spending, Ramp could be for you. Ramp is a corporate card and spend management software designed to help you save time and put money back in your pocket. With Ramp, you can issue cards to every employee with limits and restrictions. You can also stop wasting time at the end of every month by automating your expense reporting. Ramp's accounting software automatically collects receipts and categorizes your expenses in real time, so you don't actually have to do that. You'll never have to chase down a receipt again. Your employees will no longer spend hours submitting expense reports. The time you'll save each month on employee expenses will allow you to close your books 8 times faster. Ramp is super easy to use. Get started in less than 15 minutes, whether you have 5 employees or 5,000. Get $250 when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/Shapiro, spelled ramp.com/Shapiro. Again, that's ramp.com/Shapiro. Cards issued by Sutton Bank and Celtic Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. So over the past 24 hours, Hillary Clinton came out and endorsed against Representative Jamal Bowman, who's openly conspiratorially anti-Semitic. Jamal Bowman is a joke of a congressperson. He is such a dolt that he believes, supposedly, that fire alarms open doors or some such nonsense. He, of course, was censured by Congress for having pulled a fire alarm in order to delay a vote he didn't like. Well, she just endorsed his opponent, George Latimer of Westchester County, in this congressional race. She tweeted, in Congress, Latimer will protect abortion rights, stand up to the NRA, and fight for President Biden's agenda, just like he's always done, make a plan to vote by June 25th. This prompted spasms of apoplexy from the woke left base. Apparently, they went nuts on Hillary Clinton. Hillary is not far left enough for them at this point. So Representative Ruah Rahman tweeted, quote, this endorsement coming right after Latimer's Islamophobic comments is right on brand, to be honest, and I'm tired of everyone ignoring it. Meanwhile, a person named Bhaskar Sunkara tweeted, imagine taking Hillary Clinton's advice in a year with Trump on the ballot. SiriusXM host Qasim Rashid tweeted, someone explained to me how a candidate funded by pro-Trump GOP donors is a strong principled Democrat who will stand up to Trump. Meanwhile, Brianna Joy Gray, anti-Semite extraordinaire, tweeted, if it wasn't already clear who not to vote for, Hillary Clinton endorsed the AIPAC challenger to Representative Bowman, who recently dog whistled that Bowman's constituency was Dearborn. That's not a dog whistle. He literally agrees with the Hamas supporters in Dearborn. But again, this is the battle inside the Democratic Party. But oddly enough, the Biden administration refuses to take up the battle, and that's why they're losing. It's why they're losing. They've got a serious problem on their hands. It turns out modern Americans do not like any of this crap. They don't like the climate change protesters. They do not like the trans pride progress protesters who are trying to take over public libraries. They don't like the morons who are on America's streets carrying Hamas flags. They don't like any of it. Normie Americans are not up for it. And the revenge of the normies is coming. All right, in just 1 second, we are going to get to Joe Biden on the international stage. Always a humiliating prospect. He's over at the G7. We'll bring you the latest on that momentarily. Parents, listen up. As a father, I know firsthand how hectic life can get, how important it is to find a little time. Sometimes you just have to have your kids like watch TV for like 15 minutes while you know, make sure the dinner is cooked. Well, this is where Bentkey, the Daily Wire's new entertainment kids app, comes in. My kids love it. Yours will too. Tons of amazing content. All of it safe for your kids. I know because it's safe for my kids, and I am very meticulous about what my kids are allowed to watch. Bentkey offers premium shows like Chip Chilla, season 1 and 2 are streaming right now, plus favorites like Super Tato and Gus Plus Us. And remember, the magic of Saturday morning cartoons, well, those are coming back every Saturday morning, new episodes. Bentkey is not just fun for kids, it's peace of mind for parents. While Disney is woking up the Star Wars franchise, I'm not kidding, Disney now put in their Star Wars franchise like lesbian Jedi or something who invented the Force. That's not even a joke. You're not going to get that kind of garbage over at Bentkey. Here's the best part. Your family can experience all Bentkey has to offer for free for 14 days. Just use code UNLOCK at checkout on Bentkey.com. Start your free trial today. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is out there humiliating himself on the foreign stage. Now, the thing to understand about the foreign stage is that most foreign countries like weak American presidents. Until the pedal hits the metal, at which point they beg America for help. They really like Americans who kind of recede from the world scene. Are some of their very, very favorites, which is why the international community still has a soft spot for, say, Bill Clinton, has a soft spot for Barack Obama. Despite the fact that the world was a significantly more peaceful and better place under Donald Trump than it was under Barack Obama, they have this soft spot for Barack Obama because he was constantly downgrading America on the world stage, and that made a lot of people have the warm and fuzzies. And everybody in the world has the warm and fuzzies until precisely the time they need America's help, at which point they lament that America isn't strong in the world anymore. Well, Joe Biden is a weak president, so he has a certain level of popularity, but the entire international stage is about to change pretty dramatically. As Politico notes, the G7 summit in the southern Italian coastal resort of Borgo Ignazia features arguably the weakest gathering of leaders the group has mustered for years. Most of the attendees are distracted by elections or domestic crises, disillusioned by years in office, or clinging desperately to power. France's Emmanuel Macron and Britain's Rishi Sunak are both fighting snap election campaigns they called in last-ditch efforts to reverse their flagging fortunes. Germany's Olaf Scholz was humiliated by far-right nationalists in last weekend's European Parliament election and could soon be toppled himself. Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister for 9 years in Canada, has spoken openly about quitting his crazy job. Japan's Fumio Kishida is enduring his lowest personal ratings ahead of a leadership contest later this year. And then there is Joe Biden. So it is an amazing constellation of winners, except, of course, for Italy's Giorgia Meloni, who's doing amazing. Right? She was labeled far-right by the entire international media. It turns out she's just a mainstream right-wing leader. And she's doing great. According to Politico, Italy's Giorgia Meloni can't stop winning. 2 years after coming to power as leader of the far-right Brothers of Italy party. Far-right, by the way, just means conservative in Europe. It doesn't mean that you're a Nazi. It just means that you're not a leftist. The pugnacious, folksy Tolkien fan from blue-collar district of Rome increases her party's popular share of the vote in Sunday's European election. She's now poised to play a critical role shaping the future direction of EU policy in Brussels. For months, under Italian stewardship, officials in Europe and the U.S. have been trying to hammer out their differences to announce a G7 plan to leverage Russian assets in frozen Western banks to provide a huge loan to Ukraine. There's still no sign of a complete deal. Again, a lot of this is because of Joe Biden's lack of leadership, ironically, on Ukraine. Joe Biden has slow-walked aid to Ukraine. He's prevented Ukraine from taking the measures that would be necessary in order for them to stop further Russian influxes of troops into the region. So what is Joe Biden doing? Well, he's virtue signaling over there. So he signed a 10-year security agreement, or they're planning to do so, that's going to supply Kyiv with a wide range of military assistance, according to National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. The deal aims to commit future U.S. administrations to support Ukraine, even if Donald Trump wins in November. The problem, of course, is that because it is not going to be submitted to the Senate as a treaty, which would make it binding law, that means an executive agreement. That means that Donald Trump can walk in tomorrow and just rip it up when he becomes president. According to the Washington Post, officials said they hope the agreement would transcend political divisions within the United States, but they acknowledge that Trump or any other future president could withdraw from the legally binding executive agreement because it's not a treaty. It also doesn't make any new commitments about Ukraine's prospects for joining NATO, which remain distant. So it doesn't add anything. It is just a talking point for Joe Biden to pretend that he's getting something done in Ukraine when he's not really getting anything done in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Jake Sullivan out there signing checks with his mouth that the American body politic may not cash. There's the National Security Advisor saying, in brusque language, Russia won't outlast the international coalition. Well, I don't know about that. I mean, given your level of commitment thus far, given the fact that you've been hamstringing Ukraine all throughout this war, and given the fact that you have no actual end goal there, I have a feeling Russia definitely can outlast you in Ukraine, as it turns out.
If Vladimir Putin thinks that he can outlast the coalition supporting Ukraine, he's wrong. He just cannot wait us out, and this agreement will show our resolve and continued commitment.
Sure. It turns out that every country that has relied on America's resolve and continued commitment for the last 50-odd years has done quite poorly in the world of in the world at large, where history didn't stop. Meanwhile, it turns out the United States is no longer even enforcing the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine said to the Brits and to the Europeans, don't get involved in this hemisphere. Apparently, there's now a giant carve-out for China. According to the New York Times, far from Ukraine and Gaza, as the group of 7 wealthy democracies gathers in Italy to discuss a range of old entrenched challenges, the nature of American power is being transformed across the region that Washington sees as crucial for the century to come, the Asian Pacific. Here, America no longer presents itself as the confident guarantor of security, a trust us we've got the superpower. The terrain is vast, China's rise too great a threat. So the United States has been offering to be something else, an eager teammate for military modernization and tech development. In this new era, many countries are doing more on their own and with U.S. help. Behind the scenes, U.S. officials are testing new secure communication systems with their in other words, we are basically trying to toss off the burden onto other countries in the Indo-Pacific. We'll see how well that works. But again, I'm not sure why anyone would commit to the United States having a long-term strategic vision when China is building a giant megaport in South America right now. Historically speaking, the United States did not stand for this sort of activity in our hemisphere. We attempted to use every element of power we could to repel Russian interference in Latin and South America, for example, during the Cold War. But now China's just doing it openly, and the United States has nothing to say. According to the Wall Street Journal, China is building a megaport that could challenge U.S. influence in a resource-rich region that Washington has long considered its backyard. The Chankay deep water port, rising here among pelicans and fishermen in small wooden boats, is important enough to Beijing that Chinese leader Xi Jinping is expected to inaugurate it at the end of the year in his first trip to the continent since the pandemic. Costco, not the place that you shop in the United States, but the China Ocean Shipping Group, they promised to speed trade between Asia and South America, eventually benefiting customers as far away as Brazil. So apparently, this now means that China is going to have a sphere of influence that includes many countries in South and Latin America. This is what happens when you have a revanchist power in China and a weak power in the United States, which is what Joe Biden is currently presiding over. And all of this does not speak well to Joe Biden's re-elect chances. The United States is, in fact, perceived as weak, and Joe Biden remains perceived as corrupt as well. So, over the last couple of days while I was out, Hunter Biden was convicted in his gun case in Wilmington, Delaware. That did buck my expectations. I thought that because it was Wilmington, Delaware, there was a fairly decent shot there'd be a hung jury. That didn't happen because the charges apparently were so clear and so convincing that there really was no defense for Hunter Biden to present. He did try the old, I wasn't high on the day I signed the affidavit form that said that I wasn't a drug addict defense, which is a weird defense. So basically it says on the form, are you a drug user? And he wrote no, and then he tried to claim in court, despite the fact that he was snorting Parmesan cheese off the carpets, he tried to claim he meant not that day, which again is awesome. Because if it says, are you a murderer? And O.J. Simpson writes no, presumably he means more than not that day. But, okay, in any case, he was found guilty on Tuesday of falsely claiming to be drug-free when he applied to buy his handgun 6 years ago. So he's convicted on 3 felony counts by a federal jury. As he departed the courtroom, he smiled and embraced his Lori, Abby Lowell, and the members of his defense team. He faces up to 25 years behind bars, although any prison term is likely to amount to a fraction of that minimum sentence. Apparently, they're sentencing Hunter about 4 months after this conviction, so it will be prior to the election. It's expected that it'll be a very light sentence at best. The White House, Joe Biden, did say that he would not actually pardon Hunter. However, the White House did not rule out a commutation of his sentence. So here's the White House saying as much.
He has said that he has ruled out pardoning his son, but I wondered about a commutation, whether that would be something that would be on the table. A commutation?
What I will say is, look, I haven't spoken to the president about this since the verdict came out. And as we all know, the sentencing hasn't even been scheduled yet. But you saw the president do an interview just last week when he was in Normandy, and he was asked, a question, a couple questions about this, and he was very clear, very upfront, very obviously very definitive, and I just don't have anything. You have his own words. I just don't have anything beyond that.
So Again, that is not a no on the commutation of the sentence. Now, the reality is the gun charges are secondary to the tax charges. The tax charges are the ones that are interesting against Hunter Biden because that implicates his entire sphere of corrupt influence that he built around Joe Biden. Joe Biden used his son as a bagman on behalf of the family, allowed his son to traffic in his name while he was sitting in the Senate, while he was vice president of the United States, all around the world. Hunter was deployed to China. He was deployed to Ukraine to sit on boards that he had no business sitting on, picking up millions of dollars from a variety of corrupt enterprises, including ones that were fronts for the Chinese government. And Joe Biden simply allowed that, and every so often would pipe in with a phone call just to demonstrate that Hunter had influence with dad. Lawyer John Yoo, who of course was a lawyer in the Bush administration, he says if Donald Trump wins, it wouldn't be a great surprise if DAs looked into Biden influence peddling.
What other avenues or areas do you think Republican DAs or prosecutors could legitimately do in order to get accountability?
Well, one thing they can look at is influence peddling beyond just the Biden family. Are there other Democratic politicians who engage in the same kind of conduct? They get their brothers hired, their sisters hired, their kids hired by foreign governments, foreign corporations, or even U.S. corporations, and then, right, try to help those companies out. Look, the Justice Department actually goes after a lot of American companies when they do exactly the same thing abroad. If you were an Exxon and you hired, say, the son of the head of Saudi Arabia, you will be prosecuted like that.
Yeah.
So why can't Republican DAs do the same thing here in the United States? And look, I don't want this norm to have been broken. I wish we were not using the criminal justice system to interfere in politics. But how else could you deter Democratic DAs from doing the same thing? If you don't, they're just going to keep doing it and doing it worse and worse.
He, of course, is right about all of that. We'll get to more on that in just one moment. First, here's an eternal truth. Vegetables taste like trash. They're bad. Take Brussels sprouts. What are they? Why are they? Well, you don't really have to know anything about that because you could just use Balance of Nature fruits and veggies. Balance of Nature fruits and veggies is the most convenient way to ensure you get your daily intake of fruits and veggies. Balance of Nature uses an advanced cold vacuum process that encapsulates fruits and veggies into whole food supplements without sacrificing those natural antioxidants. The capsules are completely void of additives, fillers, extracts, synthetics, pesticides, or added sugar. The only thing in Balance of Nature's fruit and veggie capsules are, like the fruits and the veggies. You need nutrients to function at your best each and every day. Balance of Nature helps you do just that. It is, in fact, kosher. And so I have been using that, particularly when I'm on the road. Head on over to balanceofnature.com. Use promo code Shapiro for 35% off your very first order as a preferred customer. Plus, get that free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com. Promo code Shapiro. Get the nutrients you need to keep yourself healthy. Do the smart thing. Head on over to balanceofnature.com. Use promo code Shapiro for 35% off your very first order. Meanwhile, speaking of the abuse of the Justice Department's legal authority, they're jailing Steve Bannon. Again, I'm not a fan of Steve Bannon on a personal level, but they're jailing him for contempt of Congress, which is absolutely insane. This means there are now 2 Trump officials who have been put in jail or will be jailed for contempt of Congress, which is a meaningless charge. It just means you didn't show up for a subpoena when Congress subpoenaed you. Peter Navarro has already gone to jail in Florida. Steve Bannon has now been sentenced to jail, and that sentence has been confirmed by a judge. Meanwhile, Merrick Garland was held in contempt by the House on Wednesday afternoon. According to Mediaite, Republican lawmakers voted to hold the Attorney General in contempt after he defied a congressional subpoena demanding the DOJ turn over that audio recording of Robert Hur interviewing Joe Biden. Remember, there is no reason to deny that recording getting into Congress's hands. We already have the transcripts. We know exactly what Joe Biden said. It's just that we want to hear how he said it. How long was he pausing between words? Was he stumbling over himself? Was he falling asleep and drooling and or vomiting in his own mouth? Like, what exactly was happening? And apparently, the DOJ and Merrick Garland, we're not turning that over. So the House Republicans held him in contempt. Immediately upon which, Garland came out and said that this is, in fact, a partisan weapon. He quoted, "It is deeply disappointing this House of Representatives has turned a serious congressional authority into a partisan weapon. Today's vote disregards the constitutional separation of powers, the Justice Department's need to protect its investigations, and the substantial amount of information we've provided to the committees. I will always stand up for this department, its employees, and its vital mission to defend our democracy." And I'm so tired of hearing defend our democracy from people who consistently undermine the democracy. It really is tiresome at a very high level. I love that he's saying that that's a partisan weapon. The contempt, but not when you actually jail 2 members of Trump's team for contempt. Merrick Garland then said that Merrick Garland could not be prosecuted. So that's always convenient when you are asked to prosecute yourself and you're like, you know what? I have found that I am not prosecutable. That's always pretty convenient. Apparently, a 57-page memo from the department's Office of Legal Counsel lays out the case for Garland's refusal to turn over the audio. And they're saying that there is no prosecution that will be forthcoming. So Merrick Garland has exonerated Merrick Garland, which is excellent news if you are Merrick Garland. Speaking of undermining America's institutions, even as they claim that it's Republicans who are undermining the institutions, Democrats continue to pretend that every Republican appointee on the Supreme Court is deeply corrupt. They tried this with Clarence Thomas because Clarence Thomas has rich friends and sometimes goes on vacations paid for by them, which I hate to break it to you, it happens a lot in America. It turns out that a lot of people pay for each other's vacations in the United States. I've done it with members of my family. I've done it with friends, actually. Like, it's not all that rare. But that apparently was deeply corrupting and terrible, and all of the rest is nonsense. Then they tried to go after Samuel Alito for flying a series of flags. Apparently his wife put out a flag that was like an upside-down American flag. They claimed that had to do with January 6th. No evidence that it did. Then he put up, and his wife put up at their vacation home, some sort of Revolutionary era flag that has been part of political protest for a couple hundred years in the United States. And that was then considered a wild and egregious, terrible thing. So now you have Democrats attacking Justice Alito and suggesting that he doesn't belong on the Supreme Court. Here is Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, a person who we are supposed to believe deeply loves American institutions, going after the Supreme Court yet again.
Justice Alito's position is laughable in this idea that he can be and that the court should be accountable to nobody, and that the only person that they should be accountable to are themselves. This kind of Scout's promise sort of set up for how we should be having ethics standards for the highest and most consequential court in the land. It is completely unacceptable. And not only is it unacceptable, but to have any one of our co-equal branches be completely unaccountable to the others is paving the path to authoritarianism, tyranny, the abuse of power in the United States. And it is structurally completely unsustainable.
I mean, it would be really terrible if a public official accepted gifts without reporting those gifts. Like, say, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez accepting gifts at the 2021 Met Gala. Like, that would be absolutely impermissible and terrible. And all these people preaching about democracy, it's just like, come on. So I believe that AOC is deeply concerned about the status of America's institutions, or is she just attempting to undermine those same institutions that she is supposedly standing in favor of? Meanwhile, in the most absurd claim of the day, Pete Buttigieg, our Secretary of Transportation, who went AWOL for 2 full months while he was on paternity leave, because of course his husband suffered from afterbirth pangs. And so he went on paternity leave, and then he showed up again and nobody even knew he was gone. And then all the trains were derailing and still nobody knew what exactly he did for a living. Well, now he's back out there trying to stump for Joe Biden. And he was attacking Justice Alito for the flags he was flying. Meanwhile, contrasting that with the magical, all-inclusive, morally wonderful Pride Progress flag, which stands for joy in America, says Pete Buttigieg.
Supreme Court justices have an unbelievable amount of power. And by the nature and the structure of the Supreme Court, there's no supervision over that power. They are entrusted with it literally for as long as they live. And part of that trust is we expect them to enter into those enormously consequential decisions that shape our everyday lives with a sense of fairness. I also hope that most Americans can understand the difference between a flag that symbolizes, love and acceptance and signals to people who have sometimes feared for their safety that they're going to be okay, and insurrectionist symbology.
Insurrectionist symbology. So again, the American flag upside down because you're mad at a neighbor, or a flag that's 200 years old, that's insurrectionist symbolism. But the uniting flag of America, again, the left is just saying the quiet part out loud now. The only flag that America should unite under is the Pride Progress flag. All right. I mean, if this is your pitch to Americans, good luck with that. All right, guys, coming up, we'll be jumping into Matt Walsh, my friend, breaking news about the trans manifesto. You remember there's the shooter in Nashville who murdered a bunch of Christian school kids. The manifesto was hidden by the cops for a while. Now it is out. It's exactly what you thought it was. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.